What's something people romanticize but is actually incredibly tough in reality? Story 1. Turning something you love into a business. Often, instead of "I turn my passion into money," it's "I turn something I love into work." I am currently scaling back my photography business because I don't love photography like I used to. It's work now. Story 2. Running cute little coffee shop bookstore. I bet you picture yourself just having a cup of joe and chatting about Cormac McCarthy with an elderly gentleman in a tweed coat. You're never going to be profitable, but you won't realize it until about 2.5 years in. Also, that guy never showed up. He's got a Kindle. Story 3. Living in Japan as a foreigner. There's a certain subset of people that really romanticize Japan and Japanese culture as highly advanced technologically and socially. It's not that Japan is actually particularly a bad place to live, but they still utilize antiquated technology, have dated social mores and brutal work-life balance, and are quite xenophobic and openly turn away foreigners from many services, even medical care. It's not some anime utopia where everything is perfect. It's quite a challenging place to live for foreigners. It seems Japan welcomes the visitor but does not always welcome the immigrant. Story 4. Traveling for work. Edit to add why. Exhausting long flights and airport procedures, living out of a suitcase, and catered meals so you're limited to what you're eating. And most of it is junk. Every minute of your time is scheduled, and you either have to or have an obligation to spend the entire time with your colleagues. Definitely from 9-5, but also your lunch break and usually dinner. Then kick-on drinks are an expectation, and sometimes it's a group brunch. You're always in performance mode and often meeting new people daily. You miss your family, including pets, and have no time to switch off and just be yourself. Even worse, if time zones mean you can only talk to your family in early mornings and late at night. Can imagine how much it must suck when you have young kids. My husband travels every few months, usually internationally and for about a week at a time, way less than some people have to, which I'm thankful for. I recently spent 2 days at a work conference for the first time and finally realized he wasn't lying when he said he usually hated traveling for work. Probably fun if you're single and genuinely love your work, but not for me, thanks. Story 5. High-paying corporate jobs. It's not all boss babes and power suits. Depending on the industry, it's 90-hour weeks and no energy for life. I had the big window corner office, a condo on the 32nd floor on the Vegas Strip, car service, laundry service, cleaning service / housekeeper, and a closet full of designer. It was great that I was able to do certain things, like take care of myself and my family, but that job literally sucked the life out of me. After 3 years, I was so depressed that I didn't get out of bed for 3 weeks and almost lost my job. That life is not what people make it out to be. Story 6. People romanticize working yourself to the bone as some badge of honor, like hustling 24/7 is the only path to success. You see it all the time, glorified late nights, sacrificing weekends, constantly grinding. The reality, it's exhausting and often just leads to burnout, not success. In the movies, the overworked genius hits a breakthrough and changes the world. But in real life, you're more likely to just end up stressed, sleep-deprived, and missing out on everything else that makes life worth living. Balance isn't lazy, it's smart. Real success usually happens when you have the energy and mental space to actually enjoy it. Story 7. I'm not a big fan of the jealousy / overprotective / possessive trend making the rounds as of late. I get the desire to be protected and the logic behind your partner feeling jealous, but I honestly can't fathom how normalized it has become. I don't want to feel jealous. I firmly believe that feeling is born from insecurity or a lack of trust. Story 8. Having twins. So many people tell me they'd love to have twins. The reality is that you're going to have a high-risk pregnancy and have a high chance of giving birth prematurely. Having 2 newborns is exponentially harder than 1 newborn. Ditto with the sleep deprivation, and those newborns are more likely to have issues you don't get with a term baby. My twins had both colic and reflux, and I was so tired I hallucinated. It might look like I had it together pushing 2 sleeping newborns in their pram, but the reality was that I averaged 1 to 2 hours sleep a night, and the reason I was out pushing them in the pram was because that was the only way they slept for any decent amount of time. I love my twins, but would have preferred they came at least a year apart. Story 9. Revolutions. So many people are screaming for one and don't comprehend at all what they are asking for. When the government is overthrown, all lull of those services that the poorest people have are cut off. Every single one. No food stamps, no health care, no shelter, nothing. The first thing that happens in times like that is a whole lot of violence, and the main victims are women and children. I tried to tell someone this, and she replied that as a black person, she knows what the stakes are. Like if you think things are going to work out for you, you're not really thinking about consequences. Story 10. Objectively looking at your life and deciding to turn it around. A lot of people think that the hard part is actually just being able to evaluate your life objectively and see what you need to change, and it gets easier after that. But the truly hard part is actually processing it and keeping that mindset down the track. A lot of people go through a very unhealthy cycle of being disappointed and depressed with their lives and themselves, genuinely want to change for the better, but end up subconsciously pushing those thoughts out of their brain. Story 11. Life as an artist. It's hard work for little pay. It can be very discouraging and degrading when people talk down about your work. It's frustrating to see people way less talented than you succeed because of luck and/or already having wealthy friends. There are many people more talented than you competing with you for sales clients. It can be cutthroat dealing with galleries, museums, and art collectives. And at the end of the day, there's always the thought, you might just be the next Picasso, but that will only happen after you die, so you won't get to enjoy any of that fame or fortune. Story 12. Owning a restaurant. Every so often, someone would talk about how much fun it would be to run a restaurant. I used to do restaurant reviews on the side for a small local newspaper. A colleague at my day job told me he and a friend were going to start a restaurant, putting in $75,000 each. They had no food service experience and thought it would be fun. I took him to a cafe nearby that had excellent food, called the owner over, and asked him if he had any advice for my colleague. He replied, "I swear this happened. Get your $75,000 in cash, say $100 bills. Bring the bills here. I'll give you a plate and a book of matches. Put the bills on the plate and set them on fire." "What?" said my friend. "It's simple. You'll lose the same amount of money as you would in the long run, but you'll save yourself months and months of pain." Eating at a restaurant can be relaxing. No other aspect of that business is. Story 13. Being unable to work due to disability. I fought agoraphobia. Being bedbound, losing all my muscles and weight, feeling like there's cement encased around me as I move at all times, and all PPL say is, "I wish I got to stay home, do nothing, and get paid for it." What's your secret to looking so skinny? I'd do anything to be so small. This is a special kind of torture, and the scraps of government funds I receive are not of equal compensation or even enough to survive off. Story 14. Working from home. It's great at first, but it can get lonely very quickly. And there are a lot of distractions at home you never think about. Not saying the benefits aren't worth it, but I sometimes wish I could escape from work. Can't do that when it's always around you. Story 15. Pulling yourself out of poverty. I assure you that zero poor people can just stop being lazy and be in the middle class in a matter of weeks, let alone years. The number of societal barriers to class mobility are astounding, and the people with the most lectures about bootstraps are the ones most incentivized to pretend those barriers don't exist. Story 16. Working in the beauty industry. I am a professional makeup artist, and everyone thinks it's so glamorous and fun because you get to look cute, make people feel beautiful and all that. Yes, it is fun, but that is only 10% of it all. It's tough, it's mentally draining, it's expensive, it's not an easy career, and I wish people would see that instead of thinking it's some fun glam job. It's so much more. It's tough, tiring. You get neck, back, wrist problems, but it is absolutely wonderful if it's your passion. I feel blessed to own my business of 10 years working amazing people and worked with some cool people and did some great gigs. I don't know how those higher-up makeup artists do it. I can't believe the pressure they face, but anyways, thought ID share. All jobs in the beauty industry are tough. Story 17. Being an artist. People don't realize that a detailed piece could take weeks to perfection and think that they can underpay for it because somehow this doesn't count as labor. The idea of being an artist is like we didn't practice, devote our time, have failures, or seek education. Our time isn't valuable because we're special or gifted, and we somehow morally owe the world our gifts. Everyone romanticizes the artist in their urban bohemian studio with everything they need, and never the struggle to find people willing to pay for their work, trying to balance creativity and working on commission. Story 18. Self-love, learning how to love yourself. Lots of people think it's just going to a restaurant/the movies by yourself, or treating yourself. It can mean recognizing people in your life who are harming you and cutting them off, which can be painful. It can mean identifying your own flaws and doing what is necessary to fix, accommodate them. Weight loss, mental health stuff, etc. Not all roses and sunshine. Story 19. Snow. It's cold up in the mountains, and the ones romanticizing it are those people who don't have to wake up early in the morning and melt ice so that some people get warm water. It's brutal to work in the morning when everyone is sound asleep in their blankets. Story 20. Pulling yourself up your bootstraps. They always say this is the way to go, but god damn it, years of 10, 12-hour workdays and a lot of crazy. It's much rougher than you would think. Far more work goes into starting a career for someone who isn't a college graduate than people would think. Like, it's hard work, but until you do it, you don't know for real. I've come across so many people who give the bare minimum at work and are surprised when they don't last long at the company. Some people think they're literally entitled to a career/money without the hard work that comes with it. And yes, a lot of achievement is based on chance. But I'm saying what you need to do when you get that chance. Story 21. Professional sports. Athletes, coaches, staff, even media. It's nights/weekends/holidays. High stress, hella hard work, high expectations. Many are paid handsomely, many are paid well, but for a short duration, many behind-the-scenes staff are not paid very well. Story 22. Being in the special forces, whether it's SAS, SEALs, Green Beret, MARSOC, whatever. The high-speed stuff is great for Hollywood, but they never publish the fully kitted-out operators stalking through the underbrush, immediately losing there because they walked through a giant spider web. Yeah, I've seen that happen. Story 23. Taking care of your elderly relatives at home because you promised them not to put them in a nursing home. It's rewarding, sure, but nobody tells you that the physical part is the easiest. Adult diapers and housekeeping. I'd easier than the awkward, painful role reversal. The hard part is going from them being in charge and having unlimited self-determination to having to step in and tell them what is feasible and what is not because you're the one in charge now. It's hard to tell your grandmother no, she can't drive, or your grandfather he can't go hunting because those aren't safe activities for themselves or the people around them anymore. It is wonderful to keep them close, but not a warm and fuzzy Hallmark card. Story 24. One thing people seriously romanticize is relationships and marriage. We're flooded with images of perfect couples and happy endings, but in reality, maintaining a healthy relationship takes a ton of work, patience, and commitment. It's not just date nights and Instagram-worthy moments, it's dealing with disagreements, supporting each other through rough times, and putting in real effort to grow together, even when things get messy. Marriage is even more intense. It's not a magical cure, all for relationship issues, and no amount of romance can replace the hard work required to make it last. There are days when things feel routine or even tough, and you have to keep showing up and choosing each other. People don't talk enough about that side of it. Story 25. Not letting disability stop you. You're such an inspiration. Do you know how hard it is to live with a disability? What we have to experience and deal with every day? How even something like having a shower has to be planned and something we have energy for? And people think it's inspiring when they see someone with a disability? What are we inspiring in you? Being grateful for what you have. Someone once told me that I made them realize that they had no excuse to not go to the gym. Like, excuse me? But at the same time, we have no other choice. Don't act like we're so inspirational because you see us getting groceries or doing normal everyday stuff. The whole point of being human is that we can adapt to almost anything. We have no idea the strength we have until we have no other choice but to tap into it. That's not something to romanticize. Survival is not romantic. Story 26. Being neurodivergent. It's not cool. You don't have ADHD BC, you forgot something. You don't have OCD BC, you like your tape dispenser to the left, but don't notice if it's moved or missing. You don't have PTSD. BC, a person was rude to you and now you dislike them. I hate the term neurodivergent because it makes it sound cool to people, so they want to be in the category. But they didn't grow up in the absolute hell that these things actually come with. Story 27. The trades. On paper, the trades look appealing because an 18-year-old can earn $19/hour as a helper apprentice and may earn $90K with overtime by the time they're 23. Meanwhile, the median 23-year-old college grad makes $55K per year, if they're lucky, with a degree from a directional state school and has $60K in student loan debt. However, the trades are in the long term. The well-discussed drawback is wear and tear on the tradesman body and associated impacts to career longevity. The under-discussed aspect relates to working with other tradespeople. Other tradesmen will always make you a worse version of yourself. They'll drag you down to their level of poor diet, poor hygiene, corner cutting, theft, substance abuse, domestic drama, domestic abuse, and general degeneracy. Most tradespeople never evolve from high school bullying behaviors and high school gossip. The women who sink so low as to be involved with you or other tradesmen are another reason to stay far, far away from the trades. Story 28. Having children. Parenting is one of the most beautiful things in life. I love my children to the end of this earth. I would do literally anything for them. It's also so hard and self-sacrificing to be a good parent. A lot of people fall in love with the idea of having a child with someone, not thinking about how it will completely change the dynamic of the relationship, not thinking about the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into being a good parent. Story 29, playing poker professionally. Even when you're good enough to be making good money, you will have losing months where you swear you've been personally cursed by the card gods. It's the worst combination of boring, hours can pass without you playing a hand, and really stressful. To make a living, it's as much about managing your bankroll and putting in a lot of hours to let the variance even out as it is about playing well. Story 30, moving to a new country. I got the easy version where I spoke the language already, looked like the population, and didn't have to worry much about the visa situation. But even then, it's learning how the new country works. Healthcare, labor laws, laws in general, jaywalking, smoking or drinking in public, housing. Then finding friends, finding out which stores sell what. It's constant questions, like learning to be an adult again, but sped up. Story 31. Mental illness? It's romanticized and demonized, and the reality is barely shown or acknowledged. You're a pretty girl with an eating disorder. Everyone cares and has sympathy. You're fat with an eating disorder. Just stop eating. Most often it's seen as cute and quirky to be manic or obsessive until it gets too real, or you're not conventionally attractive enough to make excuses for. Story 32. Being a professional artist or working in creative industry. Most of the time it includes permanent poverty, never-ending amount of work, stress, and long terms of unemployment. Also, in order to support yourself, you have to have a second job. It's nothing like in movies. You don't necessarily get to hang out with the cool people. You have no money to party. Most of the time you are just bored and try to seek out something which gives you good ideas. And no matter how much you work, you might just remain unknown and forgotten. If your work is not commercial enough, nobody gives you any deals or buys your work, even if you had literally worked most of your life for it. When people treat the product of your passion as garbage, you become frustrated and depressed. Negative reviews hurt. And if your art isn't mainstream enough, the public tends to think that it's basically worthless, that anybody could do. Also, people think that you don't have real job and are just lazy. Even if you spend countless hours making your art, you don't get any respect. And in many genres of art, there is basically no possibility of getting wealthy. Nobody gives a lot of money to a poet or a dancer. There is no material benefits in being an artist. Story 33. Everyone who wants to return to tradition has never had to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to work long, thankless, exhausting hours on a farm to earn an absolutely meager living and have to drive for hours to buy any supplies they need or work even more hours to produce them themselves. People who want to VRN don't want to actually work a farm. They want to own a farm, others work / Story 34. Being a small-time landlord means easy money and you are rich. Tenants think they buy the houses either at a discount or they have so much money they are willing to pay above market rate. Tenants think they randomly pick the greediest number for rent they can get away with. In reality, unless you are the only place to rent in a 20 kilometers radius and people need to rent there, you have lots of things setting your price. Mortgage rates, insurance rates, maintenance costs, inflation, licensing, pricing in the area. There is a ton of work required. Story 35. I'm going to retire and run a B&B. You can do one or the other, but not both. You will have people you don't know in your house 24/7. You will be constantly cooking and cleaning. You will have to have a smile on your face and be polite to people who complain the room you spent 2 hours cleaning is filthy. You will never have a weekend off. I could go on. Story 36. Academia / dark academia. I'm doing a PhD in a subject that gets a lot of attention from aesthetic and fandom communities online. I love my topic and the ability to make ancient literature and languages my life. But objectively, it's a really, really bad and risky decision if you want to be prosperous and stress-free. Yeah, there's a nice library and coffee shops and big leather-bound books and sculptures and poetry and so on. But there's also hours and hours of tedious work looking for sources. Trying to find a book just to discover it's 300 pounds and only available in Italy. Writing and revising your ideas until they don't even seem to make sense. Constantly stressing that you haven't included enough citations from scholarship, or that someone else has already written on your project, or that you're not doing enough / working fast enough. Also, I am broke and have to work as a bartender to pay the bills. My study looks very cute and dark academia with the big desk and little statues and bookshelves and comfy chair when it's tidy. I'm in the middle of drafting a chapter and my room looks like a bomb has hit it. There's books and papers everywhere. The place is a mess. I'm behind on cleaning and laundry, and my diet is awful because I spend all my time writing, and when I'm not writing, I'm too zonked to do anything. Closer to Raskolnikov than The Secret History. Funding for the humanities in the UK is pretty bad and also very competitive, and wages for early career academics are not great. Story 37, DIY home renovation. The only house we could afford was a fixer-upper. 3 years later, we are finally at the finish line, but man, has it been time-consuming, labor-intensive, expensive, and so very, very dusty. I feel so blessed to have a house and be able to afford to do said renovations, but we spent essentially every weekend and moment after our day jobs working on this house. I cannot wait to have a weekend when we are done to actually relax and not have to think about the next project. Story 38, a home birth. I birthed 3 babies at a hospital and then decided to have a home birth. I thought it would be beautiful and magical and all the wonderful things. Boy, was I delusional. I mean, I went on to have another after that one, so I guess it wasn't terrible, but it certainly wasn't this calm, quiet, and magical moment. Story 39, having pets, especially a dog. Many people who gets pets just don't know what they are in for. Dogs require a lot of time, care, and knowledge, and many people are just not ready for that level of responsibility and unfortunately end up regretting it. Even with a cat, you need to be around to feed it and clean up after it, make sure it is well groomed, and goes to the vet. Many people simply give them away when they move or when life circumstances change. It's sad. Story 40, science. Every student going into their PhD thinks they are going to change the world. But turns out most revolutionary work has already been done, and most papers are really not that useful. There's only maybe a handful of truly groundbreaking papers across all fields every year across hundreds of thousands of researchers. Story 41, homesteading. Had that dream for years. Husband and I moved to the country with our son to start it back in 2017. We moved into a family-inherited one-story 1940s cottage on 5 acres of land next to a railroad with well water. There were pecan trees, a pear tree, and blackberry bushes in our yard. Had chickens. A mini laughable excuse for a garden. Georgia red clay soil is awful for gardening, BTW. Cooked and baked all meals from scratch. Canned what I could. Made my own household cleaners and herbal teas. Line-dried our laundry. Husband hunted and fished. Homeschooled our son. Had future plans of beekeeping, having a dairy cow, a few goats, and expanding the garden. But it was hard just managing the little we had. Keep in mind, we were used to living a life of urban convenience for over a decade previously. Stray dogs knocked out most of our flock. Rabbits, pests, and other wildlife ate our crop, and I was worn out on a daily basis from jumping around all day from task to task, all while trying to homeschool a struggling autistic child. Then our house flooded. After cleanup, mold grew and it became inhabitable, so we moved. A family member took over the house and demolished it soon after and rebuilt it. In 2020, we moved into a 70s brick ranch on 1 acre the next town over. No pets or livestock. No garden, by choice. We simplified our responsibilities as I had another child. We lived our dream for a few short years. But it was more work than we initially planned for, and the dream turned into a massive burden. I'm glad we did it, but it's not what most people romanticize it to be. Story 42. Being very high IQ, 150 plus. Giftedness is a terrible name for what is essentially neurodivergence with benefits. It is incredibly isolating. Problems include hypersensitivity to everything, sounds, smells, more intense emotional reactions to everything, never being able to share your inner world in a way that doesn't feel like too much to those around you, that is, forever alone, always bored with responsibilities to the point of dysfunction and underperformance, constantly making parts of you invisible to avoid intimidating others, ESP authority figures. Takes longer to ramp up on simpler things compared to most people, since your brain can only take in information at a higher level of complexity, even when the thing is meant to be consumed at a lower level of complexity. Society isn't designed for you, nor are norms and rituals. People cannot empathize with you well enough and end up making assumptions about when you're okay. You're simultaneously precocious and immature because different experiences have been metabolized at different levels. Intellectual and philosophical queries are quickly processed while social interactions are very limited, and hence, you accrue less experience. Comorbidity with ADHD and autism is a hoot too. Story 43. Being pregnant with twins. When women find out I had twins, they will say to me, "Wow, I hope I have twins when I get pregnant so I can be one and done." Sure, Jan. It by far has been one of the most taxing things my body has ever endured in all aspects. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. I gained 100 pounds. It's been years now, so it's all calmed down somewhat. But yeah, it definitely is not one and done. Story 44. Music theory. It's 4 quarters time. No, it's 5 quarters time, or come in on the 2. Do you do TF? On YouTube, go watch Live at Daryl's House, Daryl Hall, and the band discussing with Kenny Loggins how to start Footloose. And then they just do it. Crazy. Another one is watch Rick Beato show how to improvise a guitar scale, then end with try it out. No, Rick, I'll just play hot cross buns. Story 45. The idea that people are awful, be alone, and other, let's face it, wealth-coded views of other people. We aren't terrible. We're social animals. We find comfort in others. We exercise our basic humanity like a muscle by just being around and interacting with each other. Empathy, sympathy, altruism, charity, these are qualities in humans that can and do atrophy if not often. Story 46. Trying to conceive. Unless you're one of God's favorites and conceive in a few months of trying, it's really hard. It goes quickly from get to have to, and it costs a ton of money if you don't have insurance coverage. We've been trying for 2.5 years and are lucky. We are only about 13 KUP. I can't count the amount of times I've broken down sobbing. Story 47. Independent life in the mountain. Getting out of the system is really hard if you are inside it, unless you have a really good budget. If you have a really good budget, though, it's very likely you are not going to be among the people who want to get out of the grid. Story 48. Maintaining a marriage. It is not happily ever after the I do, and issues that weren't resolved or addressed prior to marriage tend to amply with time. If there was any abusive-like traits or general lack of respect walking into the marriage, expect those to ramp up as the years drag on. You marry the person you see and know today. Does change, but rarely for the better. Remember that many people change for the worse after marriage as they think they no longer have to try. Story 49. Marriage. It takes a lot of effort and dedication to make it work. This is on both parties. Disney screws it up. They make it seem as if a person is not whole without a partner, which is patently false. They also talk about the notion that everything will always be perfect. Story 50. Owning a house. For those who don't own a house, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I am saying there's downsides you don't think about. Water heater broke in your apartment? Okay, call maintenance and they'll fix it. Yes, slumlords exist, but for the most part it will get fixed relatively quickly and at no direct cost to you. Water heater broke in your house? 100% your problem. Go find a plumber. Get quotes. Schedule an install. Pay the several $1,000s out of pocket. Oh, and I hope you don't have hot water for your heat source, radiator, in the winter. In which case, go buy a bunch of electric heaters so your pipes don't freeze in the 3 days it'll take to get your heater redone. Every 10-20 years, expect to shell out $20K plus for a new roof. Unless you go metal, then you're good for like 50 plus years, but you're looking at $50K plus. Oh, you want an electric car and charger? Cool. The charger will be $500. Running the new electrical line from your circuit breaker will be $500 more. Oh, but your circuit breaker is old, so we need to upgrade that. $1,500. Oh shoot, it's too close to your washing machine discharge. So now we need to move the whole breaker $1,500. And we have to upgrade you to 240 service $600. Oh, and your ground wire is grounded outside and to the water line inside. But new code requires 2 outside grounds and an indoor ground that is not on the water line. So we'll need to run new ground wires through the house, $3,000. Oh, and one more thing, $250 for the permits to do this work and another $150 for the municipal inspection afterwards because that's why. So your $1,000 EV charger in line costs $8,000, except that's the pre-tax price. Be prepared to do all your own maintenance work too, or pay someone to do it. Check for pests. Do the landscaping, clean the gutters, pump the septic tank, scope the sewer line. Got bad neighbors, get a new job across town. Want to take a job in a new state? Awesome. Go through the process to sell your house. Your obligation isn't over at a lease expiration. You can't just move. Make sure you have homeowners insurance, which is orders of magnitude more expensive than renters. Ultimately, I love it. I love the benefits of home ownership, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There is always something that needs doing. There is always something that's going to need replacing. There is always more money to be spent. Oh, and your mortgage isn't fixed. It will go up because of taxes and insurance. Rent is the most you will pay in a month for housing. A mortgage is the minimum you will pay. Renting is not throwing money away. The money lost is what you are paying to not deal with the costs and risks of home ownership. From a purely financial perspective, yes, buying will always be better because you're building equity and not paying their profit margin. But I know some people who sold their house and moved into an apartment because they prefer not having to deal with the stresses of home ownership. Story 51. Being in a committed relationship with one person for a lifetime. You're going to butt heads with them over one thing or another at some point. That's what makes it tough. It takes work. That's what a lot of people don't realize when they go, I want the wedding of my dreams. Yeah, but do you want the commitment also? Think long and hard about it before you skip through the terms and conditions. Story 52. Learning a second language as an adult. I used to think maybe it was just laziness that kept people from learning a native language when they immigrate. This was a big talking point growing up in a conservative household. This is America. Speak English. Never mind that basically no one who ever says that has learned a second language themselves here. But holy. You have to be so determined, so consistent. You have to practice damn near constantly. The grammar is super difficult and complex. I'm talking hundreds upon hundreds of hours of exposure and active learning both. Now, when I encounter people who don't speak any English at all, I do not get frustrated because asking them to learn it is a Herculean task. Everyone should attempt this at some point. It might teach them some empathy. Also, language classes should start in pre-K or kindergarten, not high school. Story 53, owning a home. Maintenance work and costs can really add up. Yard care, replacing worn-out things, painting, dealing with flooding or carpeting and tile work repairs and replacements, roofing stuff, deck stuff. There's always something the previous owners didn't tell you about and that the inspection overlooked. Story 54. The profession of a writer is often associated with creativity, freedom, and high social status. Many people dream of becoming a writer, inspired by the images of the great classics and their works. However, the reality may not be as rosy as it seems at first glance. Writing is hard and painstaking work. Creating a high-quality literary work requires not only talent, but also perseverance, and hard work. A writer should be prepared for the fact that his work may not be recognized immediately, and the process of writing a book may take many months or even years. The profession of a writer does not always bring high income. Even if a work becomes popular and sells in large numbers, the author may not receive a significant portion of the profit due to various commissions and deductions to publishers, agents, and other participants in the book market. Writing requires constant self-education and development. The literary world is changing rapidly. New genres, styles, and approaches to the creation of texts are emerging. A writer must be aware of all these trends in order to remain relevant and in demand. Story 55. Being a pilot and having a family. I love my job, but it takes a special person to put up with the schedule. At home during the week, gone on the weekends a lot. If I'm home and they've had a tough day, best not to mention that I worked out, played 18, and had a coffee at that cute new shop around the corner. Been lounging around the house all week and your partner is excited to spend time with you this weekend. Maybe check out the farmer's market. Surprise, 5-day trip, babe. I'll call you when I get to the Marriott in West Palm. It gets better depending on the job, but it never really goes away. AIDS, aviation-induced divorce syndrome, is a thing. Story 56, university. A lot of people make it out to sound like after high school. When you go to university, you have so much freedom, time to do anything you want and have the best time. In reality, it's a lot of work, and to be honest, I don't think I go out much because of deadlines, exams, but that's just my personal experience. University is different in Australia than it is elsewhere. Story 57. Farming, there's a movement, romanticize it as an idyllic and rural lifestyle. The reality is this. You're a small business owner who has to make ends meet with backbreaking work, just as likely to work with the local accountant and looking at spreadsheets. Deal with banks and the government for loans and assistance. Contacting with large companies and looking for suppliers during a recession or drought. Chances are, you actually have to get a college degree to better understand the type of farming you're going to be doing. Sure, you can find multiple generations of farmers working on one farm, but they are dying breed for a reason. Large company farms are dominant the industry. They can make life harder for you just by being able to get the lion's share of the water. The idea of moving to the countryside and start a traditional family from the 1800s is a sad joke. It's a serious ordeal you can't go blindly into. With serious injuries, known people who have lost hands, pulled discs, and have been attacked by wild/domestic animals. I have no idea why anyone would think that life would be better if they lived a trad life. Story 58, work travel. Don't get me wrong. I love it. I go on extended trips to Asia at least 5 times a year. Europe, 4 times a year. I've seen places I could never have afforded to go, but it's mentally and physically exhausting at times. I spent over a third of my year in hotels, and it's so difficult to maintain friendships outside the small subculture of colleagues who also work in my niche industry. Story 59. I'm from a country that is very famous for their agricultural SS, but working on a farm is for most of the farmers incredible hard work. From early mornings to late at night. No vacations or days off because the crops need tending every day, and the animals need feeding/milking every day. A lot of the younger generations do not want to take over from their parents because they know how much hard work it is. So much can go wrong. Drafts, floods, diseases, plus coping with all the regulations and a government who is changing same regulations almost every year. Normal farmers do not have the time to be an influencer and look cute on social media. Story 60. Traveling overseas for work for long periods. It's work, not a holiday. A lot of work is not in touristy areas. It can be in some quite unsafe cities, so even walking down the street to a local bar for a meal isn't an option. You have to drive everywhere. It's lonely and isolating. You often are putting your personal life on hold as weekends can become about passing time, not spending it with friends and family. Story 61, The Starving Artist. A friend of mine moved to LA a long time ago from overseas. He wanted to work in film and has been trying to do something basically since he was 20. So it's been 20 years now. He has had some minor success, but not enough to live on. He didn't tell me until later, but he has been living on credit cards almost all this time and hasn't always had money to eat. What will he do when he is 80? He never met anyone or has been in a relationship before. He definitely can't afford a nursing home or anything like that. Story 62, Farming Homesteading. 90% of people that tell me, I just want to live a simple life on a farm, wouldn't last a day doing actual farm work, LOL. It's not just a job, it becomes your entire lifestyle, and it's never-ending labor. For most people, trust me, you don't actually want to be a farmer. You really just want to be wealthy and not have to work your corporate job anymore, which I understand. Duh. Me too. Story 63, Motorcycle Road Trips. The quintessential midlife crisis fever dream. Everyone imagines themselves on a BMW GS riding around the world and getting served tea by kind locals in the middle of nowhere as some kind of crossover between Ewan McGregor and Ben Stiller's Walter Mitty. The reality is that 99% of cases end up as Thurber's original Walter Mitty, just like 99% of GS don't go past the coffee shop. Motorcycle trips are not easy. In fact, they're quite miserable most of the time. With a sore ass, sore back, sore everything. Dealing with the rain and cold as the weather will not always play nice. Living out of a suitcase and bleeding money as you're trying to maintain the bike while very clearly not working. And for many, the struggle is part of the charm. It's one of those experiences where they're better in retrospect, but during it can drive you nuts. The reality is that most travel bloggers you see doing that stuff have no real concern about money and just have a lot of passive disposable income. Most people won't actually manage to ever find the time, money, and courage to go on a trip longer than a weekend. It's tiring, it's dangerous, and it's probably beyond the S level of most riders who have more money than sense. Story 64. Starting over in a new city. Sure, there are a lot of success stories, and it can be great for some, but it's a huge leap of faith that in reality, most of us are not bold enough to make work. Despite what sitcoms have told us, you're very likely not going to instantly hang out with your neighbors or coworkers and be immediately assimilated into an already tight-knit friend group. It's isolating and scary and can actually be very depressing. When I first moved to LA, I didn't know a soul there, and my closest friend's family were 4 hours away. I remember crying on my way home from work one day because I realized that if I choked on my dinner or had some other freak accident, nobody would even know for at least a day, and that terrified me. Story 65. Living alone. I'll add to this, living alone, but having a girlfriend, a demanding job, and being a homeowner. Work is 50+ hours/week. The girlfriend I see every day, she either stays at my place or I stay at hers, depending on her kid's schedule. Gym 5 days a week and staying on top of yard work and general home maintenance. I never get to sit down. Wake up at 4 a.m. and get to sit down when I get in bed around 9:30 to 10 p.m. 6 hours sleep at most and do it again tomorrow. Story 66. Everything. Literally everything. Especially things that's the opposite of what a person has in their life. It is always a two-sided coin. People always admire or congratulate someone who has or does or is forced to endure something they themselves haven't had the pleasure or joy of having or experiencing or suffering from. The grass is always greener on the other side, but we only see that side through a window. We don't see what is going on out there when the curtain is closed, or we don't see it without the filter of the glass or what is really happening that the cameras or reels or posts or the media in general doesn't show. Story 67. Hairdressing. It isn't all $500 highlights and trendy outfits. Most of us work in chain salons for minimum wage, maybe 40% commission if you're lucky. It's little old ladies shouting their bigoted opinions at you and some mom complaining about price BC. You gave their squirmy, crying toddler a bald fade. BC, she wasn't a discount BC. It's just a kid's cut. What's the big deal? I could go on. But you get it, LOL. Social media has ruined my industry. Story 68. People think living in a cabin in the woods somewhere is a fun idea until they try it and realize that it's a lot of work to clear your land, then become more self-sufficient with cutting wood for a wood stove in winter, hauling in your water until you can get a well drilled, buying a generator for power or solar. You better be ready to work. It's really a self-selecting process. Either people know or accept that the lifestyle has its price, or they sell out in 2 years or less and move back to the city. Story 69. Homesteading/farming/growing your own food. Yes, there are a lot of books saying you can grow on something less than an acre and have plenty of food, but you are also generally going to do most everything manually besides some tractor work. Everything. All the seeding, weeding, harvesting, preserving, terminating, fertilizing, mulching, etc. Unless you plan on having a variety of tractors/implements to harvest different crops. Most people are not mentally prepared for how much work actually comes with homesteading. There's not much free time available after all the chores are done because the moment you finish one job, another can finally start. Farming and growing food in general can be super satisfying, but ask any farmer that grows on more than a couple acres what their stress level is like at any point of the year. Currently, farmers experience stupid high levels of depression/anxiety, which unfortunately leads to suicide for many of them. Story 72 things. Through hiking long-distance trails like the Appalachian or Pacific Crest Trails, there's this romanticized vision of what it would be like, sauntering through the woods every day. In truth, the novelty wears off quickly, and by day 3 you realize it's going to be incredibly difficult. Don't get me wrong, it is incredibly rewarding and I wouldn't trade my experiences for anything. But hiking 25 miles a day for 100 days is brutal on your mind and body. The second thing is working in Antarctica. I've spent 9 seasons working there, and there are always the wide-eyed 20-year-olds who arrive thinking it's going to be amazing for 6 months. Again, the novelty wears off quickly, and soon you realize you are working in a very lonely and hostile environment. On long shifts. Life on the ice is very hard. For me, a scientist, it has been absolutely worth it, but that doesn't make it any easier.